Then the kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a shout. "Look, here is the bridegroom. Come out to meet him." Then all those bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise replied, "No, there will not be enough for you and for us. You had better go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves." And while they went to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the other bridesmaids came also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he replied, "Truly, I tell you, I do not know you. Keep awake, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour."
And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Once again, faced with a rather difficult parable. This has been a series of difficult parables, hasn't it? I mean, we covered that one about the vineyard owner who pays the same wage to people throughout, even though people who would come at the very last hour of the day, same wage as the people who had been there for the whole day toiling in the vineyard. We covered that strange parable last night about the guy who gets kicked out of a wedding celebration for mere failure to wear a wedding garment, and he'd been invited in off the street. You know, we look at these parables, we think, if this is what Jesus means, it represents the kingdom of heaven, either later or now, I don't know if I want to be a part of it, right? It just seems like mean-spirited, unfair, and so forth, until we do what Jesus asks us to do to begin with. Develop hearts and minds that are like children. Look at these parables through the eyes of a child, and suddenly they open up, become expansive, and you start to see the love, the grace, the wonder, the compassion in these stories. You know, just the fact that this happens a couple weeks in a row, and it's sure going to happen this one where we got a doozy of another one, it should already suggest to us that if we're not developing a childlike spirit, there could be a whole lot of heaven that just simply washes by us and we don't even recognize it. In fact, we might even think it's the opposite. Jesus says, pay attention, develop this childlike spirit, and you will encounter heaven not just in the afterlife, but you'll find it right here in this world. So once again, now here's the difficult one. On the surface seems very, very unfair and mean-spirited. Here we have these wise and foolish bridesmaids. In the Greek it's virgins. They're waiting the coming of the bridegroom, and 5 of them have enough oil to go if there's a delay, and 5 of them haven't brought enough, and sure enough there's a delay, and here they are, these ones who didn't have enough oil, asking the ones who had plenty, hey, give some to us, and they refuse them. They say, go buy it in the marketplace. Like, how many merchants are going to be opened after midnight in the marketplace? Really? It makes these wise virgins seem pretty mean-spirited. And then we get to the end of the parable, and it seems even worse. Those foolish virgins, they finally, wandering through the dark, apparently find their way to the wedding celebration, awfully late, but it's still going. And so they knock inside, expecting to be let in, and the master of the house opens the door and says, I don't recognize you. Go away. They're out in the cold. Probably with that guy from last week who got booted out of the wedding celebration for not wearing a garment. I mean, how on earth is this a model of how heaven works? On earth or in the afterlife? Well, happily this week we seem to have some help Remember that 7th century storyteller, a famous one named Aesop? He tells a parable that sounds a lot like Jesus' parable. Remember the parable of the ant and the grasshopper? Do you ever hear that as a child? Or maybe you've read that to your own children? Or are you just giving them video games? Right? I don't know. No, so the way it goes is the grasshopper's out, it's a beautiful summer day, he's chirping, he's playing his violin, and then along comes this ant who's dragging this giant ear of corn, toiling with great effort, and the grasshopper says, "Why are you doing that?" He said, "Well, winter will be coming soon, and we need to be hard at work getting ready." The grasshopper says, "Winter's a long ways off, and winter can worry about its own needs. It's summertime, our job is to play and have fun." Of course, then winter comes, and all of the ants have more than enough food to share amongst their community, and the grasshopper is lying half dead, realizing, it's good to prepare for times of need. That sounds a bit like this parable. Some people don't have enough, they haven't prepared, and some people do, and there are consequences to these actions. Seen from this angle, the meaning of heaven, is that if you're hardworking and industrious, you get in. If you're not, well, too bad, so sad. It sounds like Ayn Rand's view of heaven, not necessarily God's. I mean, who among us, if heaven's only for those who work hard and all the time, working for God's kingdom all the time, never ceasing, who among us will get in? And if we could, who would we see there? Pretty lonely place, I suspect. Paul says we're saved by grace and faith, not by our works. So there seems to be something off. Like maybe Jesus is more than just simply a simple, moralistic fable teller. In fact, our guest last week at Darkwood Brew, Melvin Bray, who's a professional child's storyteller, says, he halfway suspects, if that's the meaning, then what Jesus is doing is offering us a negative example of what heaven would look like if parents created it. Really, Aesop wrote these fables so parents could help children overcome their childlike instincts, not reinforce them. Jesus seems to want us to live by our childlike instincts. What could be going on in this parable? Well, oftentimes, Jesus tells parables if you step into them, again, like with the eyes of a child, that's helpful. But in this parable, the main actors are children themselves. I mean, a virgin bridemaid in their day would have been a child. And if we pay careful attention to how these children act, maybe they themselves will provide us a clue or two. So, for instance, we have at that front of the parable that the kids. Some of the kids have enough oil, some of them don't have enough oil, and the kids who don't have enough oil ask their friends, "Hey, we want to go to the party too. Do you have some oil?" What would you expect a child with lots of oil on their hands to do in that situation? Well, you'd expect them to share, right? They're going to share. I mean, wise child, foolish child. Both kinds of child alike. It's in their nature. They want to share. They're not thinking about the big principles that their parents keep wanting them to learn. They're like, my friends want to go to the party too. My friends need oil. I'm going to give them some oil. And they're not thinking about if they're going to run out or not. They're just going to do it, right? But these children in this parable do not do it, which should tell us something. That there's more to this oil than meets the eye. There's something about the oil, in fact, that if these children are acting like children and they're examples of the kingdom of heaven, then whatever the oil really represents apparently cannot be shared, though the children themselves might wish like crazy to share it. See, Jesus over and over again tells stories that about physical, external circumstances that were meant to represent internal spiritual realities. Kind of like last week, the people who come in off the street to the party, suddenly they're wearing wedding garments. And are they wearing physical garments? No, it's an inner soul kind of thing going on. So what is this oil? What does the oil represent? What is it that a person possesses that illuminates, that may illuminate them, that may illuminates the world before them, that cannot be shared even if you want it to be shared? I'm reminded of a time a few years ago when I was a Boy Scout and growing up on Mercer Island, Washington. And in 1977, my troop attended the National Jamboree in Moraine State Park, Pennsylvania. Some of you have heard this story long ago. But we went, and before the Jamboree started, we toured a little of the East Coast. And the high point of that tour was New York City. And we went up in the Empire State Building, which at the time was the tallest building on earth, I think. But up in the gift shop, I found a treasure. I remember the view, but what I really remember was in the gift shop. I found a big King Kong button. It was awesome. And with a little ingenuity, I modified this button to become a neckerchief slide for my Boy Scout uniform, and my buddies thought that was the coolest thing ever. We were all pretty young. And so here I am with this neckerchief slide, the King Kong button, and I can't remember where we were at the time, but there was another troop staying in the same hotel we were, a troop from Florida, and I was outside my room going to get some ice, and one of the Florida scouts sees this awesome neckerchief slide and says, "Hey, that's really cool." And I said, "You want it?" Now, little did he know, I was setting him up for a deal. You see, one of the great joys of going to National Jamboree is you take a bunch of souvenirs and trinkets from your own location, you go to Jamboree where you meet scouts from all over the country, even some out of the country, and you trade for stuff from where they are at. So I'm like, "You want it?" He says, "Well, yeah, I'd love it." I'm like, "What do you have to trade for it?" He looks, he wasn't expecting that question, and kind of says, "Well, I don't really have anything to trade for except," and he looks in his bag, and he pulls out this souvenir Florida license plate that had friendship stamped on it. He said, "I got this." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" I figured he's already kind of in the deal, like he's got a lot more loot in his bag here that if I just kind of hold off, he's going to ante up a bit. And I'm like, no way. I wouldn't even consider it. "What else you have?" He says, "All I've got are these license plates." Well, at that point I said, "No deal," and I made move to walk away, but he kept holding out his plate. He said, No, take it. I'm like, "Well, I don't want to trade." He goes, "No, take it. Out of friendship. I don't need anything in return." Yeah. I took his license plate then, the thanks, and I didn't give him my King Kong's neckerchief slide. And I'm a minister now, I know. And, when the Jamboree started, the weight of that started sinking into me. It's like, here he had given me this friendship license plate, but he could not give me that which was more important, like a friendly, generous spirit. And at National Jamboree, that started really sinking in. It was as if that my failure to offer any kind of generosity in return held up a big mirror in front of me, and there was like this big, gaping hole right in my heart where like generosity and good spirit should have been. I didn't like what I saw. So I searched for that scout. Throughout the entire Jamboree, I looked high and low for that scout. I was going to give him my King Kong button and a few other trinkets I'd brought with me from Mercer Island. But I never found him. Never found him. And in many ways, you could say that for the last 38 years, I've been looking for that scout. It's like trying to make sure that if presented with some action of grace extended to me, that I will give grace in return. Or even better yet, sometimes trying to prepare myself to offer grace before it's ever given. One of these days, I hope that my oil lamp will be built up enough that I will be counted as one of the wise versions rather than the foolish ones. How about you? What's your oil level feeling like? I'd suggest maybe we take just a moment and think back to the last 2 or 3 really generous things we've done. Can you identify those as music plays for just a few moments? Find them, and did those actions, did they fill your lamp or did they empty it? I did that exercise at 9, I do it at 11, and I'm still surprised when I think back, and it's like these acts of generosity really are additive, aren't they? They're not subtractive. I mean, it actually works that way. So maybe that has something to do with that first half of the parable, stuff you can't give away that can only be found within yourself, finding that generous, kind-hearted spirit. But what about the second half of that parable? I mean, here, these virgins who did not have that within them then are sent out into the marketplace, and obviously they're not going to find anybody selling oil then, and if this oil really can only be found from within, even if the marketplace would have been fully open, they wouldn't have had the kind of oil that Jesus is talking about. And so they wander in the dark, and somehow in the darkness they find their way to the very location of the wedding feast. And obviously then, yes, they made it late, but they made it, and the celebration's going, rip-roaring going. And so they knock at the door, expect to be let in, and the master's like, I don't even recognize you. Go away. And what do we do with that? Well, if there's no recognition, I think that's important. Jesus seems to be telling us something. I do not recognize you. If they not recognize, that means there's no light on their faces. They can't see. You can't see their face. If you can't see their face, that means they still don't have any oil in their lamp. In other words, now they're expecting to come into the celebration, but they're still as stingy, still as resentful, still as unready to offer grace in return for it, let alone initiate grace as they ever were. And now they want to come into this party? It may seem harsh that the master would say, go away, essentially, until you can find a generous spirit. But how harsh is it really? What's more harsh, in fact? To send them out saying, come back when you actually have a heart? Then maybe we'll talk about letting you in. Or letting them in before they actually had a heart. Would they even enjoy the celebration? I mean, basically, the party that's going on inside is like, it's full of those people like the Florida Scout who gives friendship license plates for no reason and doesn't expect anything in return. I mean, would they even enjoy such a party? Probably not until there was an interchange, right? So they're out in the dark until they find that spirit. Maybe God's a little more gracious than we give God credit for. You're welcome to the party. You've always been welcome to the party. You always will be welcome to the party. But I want you to enjoy the party. And by the way, I want the guests to enjoy you too. If the rule of the party is share, be generous, then you're going to need to change, and the door will be wide open. This isn't, again, Jesus is always locating heaven in this life. This isn't simply some sort of afterlife parable. This is about here and now. You're never going to connect with life. You're never going to get your full human identity, the illumination that shows your face to the world, unless you find that generous spirit within. This is a core value, a core human value, according to Jesus, and a core kingdom value. I'm reminded of a book by Eugene Peterson called Running with Horses. Eugene Peterson talks about wandering the woods one day and seeing a limb stretched out over a lake and several swallows perched on that limb. 3 of them were babies. And apparently it must have been like flight lessons. Says one of the parents kept nudging the others down the limb until like one would fall off and start pumping its wings probably for the first time, and just before it got to the water, soar. Next one falls off the limb and soars. But the third one was a bit more tenacious. Grasping to the limb, it refused to be budged. No matter how hard that parent was shoving against it, it just wouldn't be budged. It dug its talons even firmer into that limb. But then it was also a little bit ingenious, because as the parent kept budging, it finally just let go just enough to flip down and re-grasp underneath. But the parent was not to be daunted here. The parent starts pecking at the bird's talons until the pain of hanging on exceeded the pain of letting go and trying something new here. And it fell and started flapping like crazy and began to soar. Was that parent being cruel to that little bird? Or was that parent helping that bird live into its identity? I mean, birds have feet and they can walk, and they have talons and they can cling, but a bird is meant to fly in the open air. That's where it gets its grace, its power, even its ability to survive. Eugene Peterson concludes that giving is what we do best. It is the air into which we are born. It is the action that was designed into us before our birth. Chris gave homework to us this week, put down the video games. Do you really mean I have to put down my Atari and stop playing Pong this week? Well, maybe in your non-electronic usage time, you'll be going out for a walk, and perhaps you'll notice a bird or two that you hadn't even realized was there before. I would suggest that if so, We take on a little more homework because we're adults. We can take on more than our kids. Every time you become aware of a bird, I mean, you're chirping, but once you notice it in a particular way, oh, there's a bird. Oh, I'm hearing the sound. Once you notice a bird this week, every time you do so, plot your next action of grace. Plot the next thing you'll do to make someone happy. Maybe surprise them. Plot how you're going to take somebody to lunch and pick up the tab, or plot how you're going to give the waiter like an unusually great tip just for no reason. Or perhaps plot how you'll do something surprising for your spouse or your child or your friend. Or extra credit if you plot how to do these things for someone who doesn't like you or who you may not like. And ask yourself, at the end of this week, am I fuller now or am I emptier as a result? And Jesus, if you're looking for ideas of how to surprise people with grace, I mean, Jesus is full of ideas in the Gospels. Just earlier in the book of Matthew, he says, let your light, it'd be an allusion almost to this parable, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. And here's a few Jesus kind of ideas. Give to everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. You have heard it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and the good. He sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Something tells me God's oil tank is full up and overflowing. Ours can be too. In a few weeks, the message of this simple parable will perhaps be more important than ever to us at Countryside Church, learning the lessons of that generous spirit when we're finding it, when we're running on empty. Where we'll be voting on whether to become the Christian presence of the Tri-Faith Initiative site and not. And no matter which way that vote goes, one thing is absolutely guaranteed. That is, some of us will be elated with what the vote is, and some of us will be very, very sad and disappointed, whichever way it goes. And there will be hurt feelings all around. What do we do with that? How will we stay together as a community of faith brought together in Jesus? Perhaps if we can hear, and not just hear, but live the message of Jesus, we will find a God who is willing to fill us with more than enough oil to keep our lamp burning. For whether we prove ourselves to be foolish virgins or wise ones depends not on which way we vote, but how we act towards each other in the wake of the vote. Will you extend a hand in friendship to someone who has voted against the way you would wish them to vote? Will you accept a hand in friendship from someone who's extended it, who voted the opposite way you do? I believe that in the wake of that vote, we are going to find out who we really are as a faith community. And I believe that who we really are is a congregation who has always had a deep well of love and grace. It was friendship that brought our congregation together 65 years ago. It was friendship that kept us going through hard times and easy ones. It was friendship that built this congregation to be the way it is. A generous, spirited, open, embracing congregation of love and light. And I believe that we will not allow the darkness to overwhelm our identity. rather like those little birds on the limb. We will all be reminded by our God, who will sometimes pushes us into places we do not necessarily go ourselves. We'll all learn to let go of whatever resentments we may harbor, whatever hurts we may feel, and soar together as sisters and brothers, wise ones in Christ. Amen.